It is February 5th, 2025. 1 month out of 2025 is gone. We're a few days closer to the return of the Shamrock Shake. Our great guest tonight is Ambassador James Gilmore, former governor, former attorney general of the great state of Virginia. Welcome to our show. And our hosts tonight are Jackie Saxton and David Shepard. Take it away, guys.
Thank you, Dwight, and Ambassador. Thank you, as always, for joining us. We have a lot to talk about. I have whiplash for the past 2 weeks because everywhere you look, there's another executive order, another thing coming out that Trump is promises made, promises kept. So we'll start out with China, and I guess we'll work our way around the map. So China, so far, not one of the places that has caved to the tariff negotiations that President Trump has been using. So what's your take on how that's going to go down, especially with them ending the de minimis loophole that they've been using to send cheap products over here?
Well, I guess my first reaction to that, Jackie, is that President Trump may have had, a two-pronged thing here. He may say, well, I'll do the tariffs on Canada and Mexico, and they have this vital interest of being right next door to us, and let's see what they do. And of course, it worked. But on the other hand, China, they may not have exactly the same dynamic. So he still wins because what he does is he actually puts the tariffs on and then helps to bring back some of the business and some of the businesses and jobs and so on from China. So he wins again. So it's basically no lose, no matter what anybody does. That would be my reaction. So let's see how it plays out, though. The day is young. This is going to be a 4-year term. You never know from day to day how this is going to play out. So that's just my reaction is let's see what the Chinese do. One more thing about this. They are actually quite vulnerable on their economy, as we know. Their economy is not good. They're not going to be able to adjust very well because, after all, they are a communist dictatorship. So they got a lousy economic theory. So they at some point may have to sort of give in and go back to their old capitalist roots and work with President Trump a little bit. And let's see what happens. But, frankly, I'm optimistic about what he's doing.
Do you think, not to interrupt, but is it the same sort of strategy with Canada and Mexico? I was kind of surprised he's going after certainly Canada with tariffs because I didn't think we really had the border issue. I see that with Mexico, but and then of course I think rightfully, and I'm happy he paused both of those because I'm not a tariff guy. I think it's playing with fire. But is it the same sort of negotiating sort of not? I don't want to use the word bluster, but is it kind of similar to what he's doing with China? It's like a shot across the bow to try to get some concessions.
Yeah, well, maybe so. Look, I mean, stepping back, David, one step. I've thought about it a lot since over the last week. And, what Trump is doing here is he's raising all new issues here. He's just opening the door wide open. You all know, and I will continue to tell your viewers, I think that the Ukraine war is the pivot of the 21st century. I think it's the key to everything that's going to happen in the next 100 years in the world. But Trump has broadened it far beyond any of that. He's now talking. I would never have thought about Greenland or Panama or any of that or Canada. I mean, he's proposing that Canada be the 51st state. I know the Canadians pretty well. I do. And I worked with them very closely when I was in Europe. And, they're not going anywhere. They're very nationalistic. They don't want to be a part of the United States. They love the United States, frankly, but they're not going to do that. But to back up, the point is he's opening the door to all kinds of new ideas, as opposed to the standard ideas, which I think he's addressing also. So, look, I'm a fan of Canada. I'm just telling you, my view about the Canadians was this. When I talked to them, I said, look, the United Kingdom, the British are our cousins, but the Canadians are our brothers and sisters. And I feel that way about them. But that's the way that is. But Mexico, on the other hand, is more of a problem case. And that's where your real southern border issue is. And so, of course, he's now imposed the tariffs there, and they're cooperating.
Yeah, I think they'll cooperate. I think they have little choice. I think they need us so badly, our market, that there's probably not much leverage. Maybe the Chinese can rebuff us. but I don't think Mexico can. With the Canadian thing, maybe if they tried to pick off a couple provinces, like, hey, Alberta, we'll give you 2 senators, join us, and split it up that way.
Well, we'll give you parts of California in exchange or something like that. I think a lot of people haven't really explored what, if anything, is going on with the northern border. Right? President Trump says that there is fentanyl coming over, that there are illegal immigrants coming over from the northern border, but so much emphasis has been on the southern border that if it is happening, it's not something that's as widely known. So it'll be interesting to see if the deterrence that was agreed upon between President Trump and Prime Minister Trudeau actually does bring forth some sort of decrease in something that we're looking for.
Well, there may be a trade imbalance there. I am not an economist, but I don't worry so much about trade imbalances myself. I think that's standard conservative thought to worry about trade imbalance. I really don't. If we're buying more goods from other countries, it means that their folks are working cheaply labor to provide us stuff for our money. I can't see that that's much of a problem personally, but that's still counterintuitive. I'm a lifelong conservative, but conventional conservative thought worries about that kind of thing.
Well, the thing is with the Canadians, you touched on this, and knowing a lot of Canadians and how they feel and nationalistic. America seemed to always sort of dominate Canadian politics because the fear is we're so big and powerful that we may in some ways overwhelm them. And if you go back to Trudeau's father, Pierre, not Fidel, but Pierre, they always had that same, was it Pierre Trudeau who said that, living next to America is like sleeping next to the elephant, and you never know if they're going to roll over and crush you. But
well, I don't know if you said it or not, but you're right. That's just the way it is. Look, Canada's a great country, and they're our friends, and they got a lot of space up there. Yeah. So we just need to get along with our northern neighbor. Mexico is differently positioned. They're differently positioned. They're right on that northern border of all of Latin America, and that's where the issue is. That's where the problem is. That's where the abject poverty is. And so we've got all this migration going on. Look, the United States is taking a position, and so do I, that people need to obey the law. I'll take a minute, and then you probably want to move on. But I actually, as you know, I'm a lawyer, and I aren't taking very many cases, but I did take an immigration case, as a matter of fact, a couple of years ago. And the guy was coming in from Canada, and he got pulled at the border, quizzed, and rejected. And not permanently, but just a light rejection, sent back to Canada. And then I was engaged to kind of deal with the issue. What's the lesson? The American law was being strictly adhered to by everybody. My client, the border authorities, everybody was strictly adhering to the statutes and the law. Why should they do all that if all you got to do is go to Mexico and run across the border in the middle of the night? Yeah. So I just think that Americans are right when they say that people have to adhere to the law. We expect it. It goes to law. If they're not going to adhere to that law, why adhere to any law? Why adhere to the drug laws? Why adhere to any other kinds of laws? So I think Americans are right to be concerned about that.
Well, and you made a good point. I never thought, and I think what you've said anecdotally, I don't think there is really a problem with the border with Canada. So I don't know what Trump's end game really was with that. I don't know. Maybe it's a trade thing or something, but I don't think there's a problem.
Maybe he was really focused on Mexico and didn't want to single Mexico out. I mean, who knows? We're not privy to the thinking that goes on in their boardrooms. Yeah. If any thinking goes on in their boardrooms, this may just be Trump doing what Trump wants to do, and he's the chief executive. He got elected by the people. He's a decisive leader, and he's doing it.
My favorite. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead, and then I'll shift.
I'll leave it with this. One of my favorite sort of digs at Canada, and I love Canada, but I thought this was a classic line about an American view of Canada kind of being irrelevant. Al Capone was being cornered by the feds because they think he had connections in Canada. And the prosecutors were grilling Capone, and they said, "We know about your Canadian connections. We know about your Canadian connections." And Capone was having none of that. And he just smiled and he said, "Canada, I don't even know what street that's on." So I always just thought that was such a, and he didn't mean to take a dig at Canada, but it was such a beautiful sort of.
Well, look, when I was a soldier, I was assigned to a NATO base in West Germany, and we dealt with the Canadian officers were there together with the German officers and the other NATO people, and they were very serious soldiers, really. And I think they have a serious army. Now, I think that we all agree they need to do more. They can't expect the United States to engage in this kind of defense spending and our allies to go light. We agree with that. So I think Canada has to do more. But I have a great deal of respect for their army. I have a great deal of respect for the citizens of that country.
So I want to shift us over to the Middle East because that was, I think, the big topic of conversation yesterday with Bibi Netanyahu's visit to the White House and at the press conferences, and Trump's claim, and we were talking about this a little bit before the show started, of, the U.S. is going to take over the Gaza Strip and we're going to control that. So my working theory on that is a tactic to try and get everyone else in the Middle East to say, well, none of us want that. So why don't we come to the table and actually figure out a solution that's going to work that isn't the United States taking over the Gaza Strip. So that's my theory, but I'm curious your take on everything Middle East that went on yesterday.
Well, I think your theory is sound. I think you're correct about that. And I must say that I've been trained in politics that you don't say things that you don't intend to do. That's where I've always been trained. I think all of us are. That's the way we American politicians work. That ain't the way this guy works. This is an entirely different kind of politician. As many people, it's almost getting tiresome to say it, but he's a businessman. He takes a position, a negotiating position, then expects other people to react to it, as you just said, Jackie. So that could, in fact, be exactly what's going on here. If you want to justify Trump a little bit and say that he's shaking up the bag, he's saying that what's working is not, that things aren't working, and that we ought to think about something else. So to back up one step, when I was watching it last night, I'll be honest with you all, I was absolutely dumbstruck. I had no idea that he was saying things like that. And I'm going to, before I forget, I'm going to say that his message last night was not one thing, but two. The one thing that he was talking about was Gaza, and I'll return to that in 1 second. But the other thing he was saying was about Iran. And this is a very serious matter. What he said last night emphatically was they cannot have a nuclear weapon. Now, Obama said that, Biden said that, but they're not believable. Neither Obama nor especially not Biden, they don't have any credibility. Trump does. And when he basically stands up there and says they can't have a nuclear weapon, he is telegraphing, at least to me, and I think he's telegraphing to the Iranians, if you continue to proceed with nuclear development, you're going to be struck by Israel or us or a combination. And I believe him. When he says things like that, I believe him. Now, that's a big foreign policy statement. I'm just telling you. Now, to return back to the Gaza situation, I don't know how you I don't know how you remove 2 million abject poverty Palestinians into other countries, flatten the place, and build a Riviera. I just don't know how you do that. That's New York real estate guy talking, but that is not real. And besides, it's a little puzzling to me. And I said this earlier today on television. How is it that we're concerned about $75 billion for Ukraine support against the behemoth Russia, Nazi-like aggression, which threatens all of Central Europe, and we're worried about a rounding era of the defense budget in the United States? That money is spent not for Ukraine. That money is spent for America. Okay, we're worried. Everybody's all worried about that. We're going to commit $1 trillion to go rebuild Gaza.
Well, and that kind of leads me to there's someone who said, I don't remember who said it, is you need to take Trump seriously, but not literally. And that's kind of what popped in my brain, because this is somebody who's since his first term, has said, we're not doing foreign entanglements. We're not getting in other countries' business. It's not what we're here to do. So I feel like it could come to that, right? He's serious about wanting to get something done in this area and create peace in the Middle East. But he's not literal in saying, let's bulldoze the whole thing and create a Riviera. Or maybe he is. Honestly, at this point, who knows?
Well, who does know? And that's actually part of his strength. People don't know. And so that gives him leverage. It's a power position to be in when people can't know exactly what he meant. Now, I make another observation, which I'm not sure people will appreciate. But one thing that struck me when he was saying these things was what he was really doing was executing Israeli foreign policy, not American. Because the Israelis are dedicated ever since the murder of 1,200 of their people, innocent people just on the other side of the border. They are committed to the elimination of Hamas and the elimination of the Gaza Strip as a threat to Israel. That is the whole reason why they've engaged in this horrible war and created this terrible destruction and killed all these people. And it still didn't work, right? Gaza's still there. The Palestinian people, all 2 million of them, they're not in prison camps. Hamas has not disappeared. To the contrary, they are negotiating with Hamas for the release of the hostages. So Hamas is still there. So what are you going to do? So this bright idea of basically leveling the place and turning it into Fort Lauderdale, it's a pretty good idea from the point of view of the Israelis, because you're actually eliminating Gaza as a threat. So if I were Netanyahu, I would, in fact, he might have actually suggested it. It's great Israeli policy. But at the end of the day, it's not possible. So, where are we here? I'm not quite sure where we are, but if I were Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, I would be sitting up and taking notice and saying, wait a minute, this guy's thinking outside the box. Lord knows what he's actually going to do.
Right.
So, he may be able to move the needle is the point, in the same way that he did with Panama, Canada, Mexico. He may actually be able to move the needle. So, I'm not prepared to dismiss all this.
Yeah, and I think that commitment to wiping out Gaza and Hamas has gotten stronger as we've started to see these hostages come back and start to hear some of their stories. And there was one girl who was released who said, there are people who talk about, well, innocent Palestinian civilians. She said, any single one of those people would have lynched me in a moment if Hamas hadn't said, no, we need her for leverage. That they are all radicalized, that there are no innocent Palestinian civilians left.
Well, Jackie, the underlying point is that I've done some reading on this just recently. The issue's still there. Now, Trump came out with some. Just suppose for a moment that the Trump proposal was taken literally. It still doesn't solve the issue of whether there's going to be a two-state solution, which Saudi Arabia is demanding. It ignores completely the issue of the West Bank. There's some talk about how the West Bank is now going to be annexed by Israel. It's exactly what they want to do. So these issues are not going away, and I'm not sure how it's going to get resolved. But I admire Trump for at least shaking this thing up and trying to make something new happen.
Yeah, that's true.
So we had pretty solid, I guess, put a bow on it with regards to the Panama Canal, right? Marco Rubio went over there and Panama basically said, we're going to end our contract with China. We're good. So I want to talk more about Greenland, because that one there's no resolution. That's another one where, is he serious? I mean, I understand strategically there's a lot of resources to be had in Greenland, but we know that Denmark doesn't want to let him go, but how do the people of Greenland actually feel about it?
Well, I have two thoughts. I'm going to, me, when I'm on a message, I'm on a message. I still consider all this stuff diversion away from the in German, the Strengpunkt, the strong point, the key point. And that point is Central Europe. I'm just relentless about this. Okay. Central Europe is the key. Obama was wrong when he talked about pivoting to Asia. That's dangerous too. Taiwan is in danger. I was there several months ago. I understand all that. but Putin actually launched a war in Central Europe. Now I'll come back to that when you're ready, if you're not ready, I'll probably bring it up again on my own. But let's return to Greenland. Yeah, you're right. The Russians and the Chinese have basically said that they want to begin to put ships up there. They want to begin to move commerce up there. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't try to put a base up there, which would be completely unacceptable to us and to the Canadians. So he's right, actually, to address this issue, but I never would have thought of it. I never would have thought of this. But he, at least his people, whoever the heck he's talking to, were aware that the Greenlanders are a lot more independent than I thought they were. I thought they were just a sort of a colony of Denmark, very passive, very benign, didn't have anything to do with much of anything. But he was clever enough, and his people, or whoever they are clever enough to recognize the strategic value of the Arctic because of the behavior of the Russians and the Chinese. So he was more alert to it than a lot of other people are. So the point is that the Greenlanders they're not all that happy with Denmark. They don't particularly want it. In fact, they said so last week. They said, we don't want to be Canadians, we don't want to be Americans, and we don't want to be Danish. We want to be Greenlanders. So that's okay. It doesn't mean that they're going to end up being Americans. And I think the idea that we're going to put troops in there and annex them by force is not likely. But once again, we're disrupting the Western area, the Western Hemisphere, when the threat to the United States and to everybody else, including you, is in Central Europe. And
let's go for it. Central Europe. Let's talk about it.
I'm going to start from the most important point. There are 4 countries that have decided that they don't like the world as it exists. They don't like the control of the dollar. They don't like the cultural control of the West. They don't like democracy. They don't like capitalism, not really. And they have decided they're going to change the world. The 21st century world is not going to look like what it looks like now. Those 4 countries have decided to change the world. And they're doing it relentlessly. They're moving forward relentlessly. The interesting thing was one country said, I see an opportunity here, and they actually pulled the military trigger. And that country is Russia. And they invaded another sovereign country. I was at the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe in Vienna when I was United States ambassador. The principles of the OSCE are all laid down. And one principle is you're not going to invade and conquer another country. Well, Russia says they're not another country, and that he can just invade them and take them over, control those people, conquer all their people, conquer their resources, conquer the food, the minerals, and add to his strength for the long-term goal, which is to be a player in changing the world. Now, I consider Europe to be absolutely essential to the safety and survival of the United States of America. That's why I support Ukraine in the war. I don't have any relations in Ukraine. I've been there, but I don't have any stake in Ukraine. I have a stake in the United States of America. And Russia at this point is threatening America through this kind of invasion. This is a former KGB guy. You know, he wants his empire back again. He wants control of not only Eastern Europe, but of Central Europe. And in fact, that will influence the politics of Western Europe. Now, if you don't think Europe's important to America, you've forgotten the entire history of World War II and Adolf Hitler. And I haven't. I've done a little fundamental reading here, and anybody who's taken 10th grade world history knows about this. So this is profoundly important. And we had better get our act together, or we're going to end up. Jackie, I'll finish with my speech with this. If we keep screwing around with this and we let this thing go and we end up with this kind of situation, sooner or later, as this thing continues to advance, and not only that, by the way, it probably triggers the Pacific. And then all of a sudden we're in a position where the people of the United States of America are suddenly going to wake up. And when they do, there's going to be a third world war. And I don't want that. My goal is to try to avert that now while you still can. Okay, that's my speech.
Well, now you got me intrigued. Who are the other 3 countries?
Well, we know who they are. They're China, Iran, and North Korea.
All right. That's
Just
what I
plain,
thought. Just wanted to make sure.
plain as day.
Are you surprised? One thing I guess that surprises me is, and I saw you a couple years ago, and it was Republican Women's Group in Harrisonburg, and you were speaking to the ladies about Ukraine and Russia, and you may have had a skeptical audience there. I don't remember, but one thing that surprises me is the trouble that Putin's had. Does it surprise you that it's been a couple of years and he hasn't? I mean, I'm not following exactly how much he gained, but isn't he still sort of mired in Ukraine? I mean, isn't this turning out to be a kind of a disaster for him?
Yes. The consequence of what he has done appears to be a mistake. I often say this, when people say, well, he made a mistake by doing the invasion, my quick response is it isn't a mistake unless he loses. If he wins, it's not a mistake. It's in fact, it's a dramatic strategic victory for him. But he's not there. And, we got kind of lucky. Now, the original invasion against a weaker opponent, a weaker country, that being Ukraine, was actually 2014. When he did an invasion, it was advancing, and he pulled back because he thought that he could win at the bargaining table that which he didn't have to expend and try to conquer. Now, it didn't work out that way. And as it turns out, that the Ukrainians at that point said, boy, we're in real trouble here. And they began to work with the United States and NATO allies and began to prepare for the inevitable second onslaught. So as a result, Putin, I think, clearly underestimated the ability of the Ukrainians to resist and their determination to resist. When I was in Ukraine, they were crystal clear to me. And I didn't see Zelensky, but I did see almost all of his cabinet ministers. And they all said the exact same thing, the exact same talking point. And that was, we're not about to surrender to these Russians. We are not Russians. We don't speak Russian. Our culture is not Russian. And we're not going to give in to this. And they're not. And they haven't. And that was Putin's mistake. He's had second and third chances to make this work for him because of Biden's inept foreign policy. He has sort of opened the door for Putin's slow motion win. But now I think there's a real risk here with Trump in the White House. If Trump decides that Putin is really a bad guy and shouldn't win, then Putin probably won't win. So let's hope that that's the way that this is going to turn out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Well, yeah, I agree with you. I just, I guess that's one of the things that surprised me, that Putin's had so much trouble. And maybe this goes to Ukraine's, they're defending their homeland and they're heroically fighting.
Yes, that's exactly what's going on, David.
Yeah.
Or Russia's propaganda machine is stronger than we thought. Because I remember when that war broke out, I thought this is going to be over in 24 hours. Russia's going to win. Yeah. But I think maybe we've all overestimated the strength of their army.
Putin probably overestimated it himself.
Yeah. He drank too much of his own Kool-Aid. So I want to shift to domestic for a minute, because one of the other major things that's been going on is what's been going on at USAID and with Doge. And I want to pick your lawyer brain, because I watched probably too much Fox News, and every Democrat they've had on there has said, okay, yes, I can agree that we shouldn't be spending millions and millions of dollars for like Iraqi Sesame Street and all this absolute nonsense. But nobody elected Elon Musk, and he can't just barge into these places and shut people out of their emails and cut all this funding. He doesn't have the authority to do that. So based on your understanding of what's going on, does he have the authority to do that?
Yeah. This is, I actually have a family member who's having a meltdown about all this stuff, but I'm fairly calm about it, to tell you the truth. I think Elon Musk is not a very attractive person to be doing this kind of thing. To have the richest man in the world, and he looks a little ungroomed. So he's a little strange to be doing all this and bullying his way into things in an undiplomatic way. But the fact is that it's not that he's not elected. It's none of that. His power is borrowed from the president, who was elected. The president has delegated him to use presidential authority to go in and look at these things. So, if somebody confronts Musk at the front door, pulls a gun on him or something and says, you can't do this, you have no authority, you weren't elected, his response is call the White House. I mean, that's it. He's as long as Trump wants him to do this, he's authorized to do it by presidential authority, in my view.
Yeah. I guess in the same way that Tom Homan is authorized to carry out the deportations. He wasn't elected or appointed by the Senate or anything like that, but Trump said, "You're my borders are, go off and do." So I guess it's very similar. Yeah,
just like General Kellogg, who, by the way, I know personally, just like he's designated as a negotiator on the Ukraine issue. He's borrowing presidential authority to do that. And I think it's perfectly legitimate. You don't have to have an elected official do every function of the government. The president does that either by authorized cabinet people confirmed by the Senate or just by people he's designating.
Right. And that's kind of a conclusion I came to today, because I said, well, with the birthright citizenship executive order, we saw lawsuits filed immediately against that by Democrats. And they're out there complaining, standing outside these buildings, having giant press conferences about how Elon Musk can't do this, it's illegal. But I haven't seen a single lawsuit come out of that. So I was like, well, maybe it's not illegal.
Well, no, you're gonna. Yeah, he's not going to win that. But let me address that for just a moment. This, once again, is unorthodox politics. We are trained as American politicians to do what we say and to do things that our lawyers are telling us that we can do. The American people don't like birthright citizenship. That's clear. They're unhappy with it as a result of this migration that we're currently experiencing right now. And it looks dishonest when women get across the border who are pregnant for the purpose of delivering their children and giving American citizenship. It is dishonest. It's not what the Constitution had in mind when the founders put that into place. But so the American people don't like it. Trump's responding to that. He's basically saying, "Okay, we're going to get rid of this." I'm sure that his lawyers have told him that it's unconstitutional. He's going to lose. But his response, it seems to me, back to the American people is, "Well, I tried. You elected me to deal with these things. I tried to deal with it. Constitution won't let me do it. So be it." And then he moves on to other issues. That's the way I see this.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
I think he's right for the reasons you mentioned, to try to challenge it and the politics of it. But even in the case of birthright citizenship, they cite this case, 1898. It was San Francisco. It was Wong Kim Oak, I think. The thing about the case, though, is his parents, the court ruled, permanently domiciled in the United States. So they didn't sneak across the border. They didn't violate any laws. And as far as they weren't foreign nationals. And as far as I know, the problem that kept them maybe from being citizens is you had the Chinese Exclusion Act. You may have had some other act that made it tougher for their parents even to become citizens. So if I were Trump, I would say we want clarification on this. And if that's the case, to look at challenge.
Well, you're a real lawyer. And,
I just read the case.
You never know. Okay, you put a case up before the Supreme Court. You never know what they're going to do. I think that I can safely predict that executive order will be overturned. But hey, you never know. And once again, it's like the other point that I was making earlier. What's Trump got to lose here? I mean, once upon a time, you would have said, well, he does have something to lose, and that is that he's going to be cast as somebody that is not adhering strictly to the rules. Well, hell, everybody knows that. So, what's he got to lose, really? So, go ahead and do it. I'm not even sure that it's good policy, personally. But
Well, and
But,
it kind of comes full circle to what I said in the beginning, which is that I have whiplash on this. So he's basically taking this approach of, I'm just going to throw everything at the wall and we're going to see what sticks. And we'll see if if the courts pull me back, if Congress pulls me back, then we'll deal with it. But I'm just going to go balls to the wall and see what happens.
well, in the case of Biden, I mean, the Supreme Court ruled against him on student loan forgiveness, and somehow he did it anyway. So,
well, Biden was wrong.
yeah, I know. I'm not saying
He
ignore
was
the.
real
My
wrong.
point is not to ignore the court, but at least if Trump's challenging it in the court, I mean,
Yeah, but no, I think this the left wing keeps yelling about. All right, I'll say something really remarkable here. I think we ought to return to legality here. Personally, that's kind of, I'm a lawyer, and that's the way that I feel about things. The left wing in this country keeps accusing Trump of trying to break the law.
yeah.
Biden absolutely did the wrong thing with that student loan thing. First of all, it was lousy policy. It was terrible policy.
Yeah.
It was the wrong thing. It was completely unfair
Yeah.
and completely wrong. I know where he got the idea, by the way, because I read it in the book. But
I'm thinking Joe Biden.
But Joe Biden, yeah, it is completely wrong.
Yeah.
But to do it in the face of the court ruling that it was improper was real wrong, because at that point you're sending a message out there. Well, I'm president; I can just do what I want to do.
Yeah.
We know anybody else is taking that position. So,
and he's never pardoned himself. So,
well,
he did not pardon himself before he left office.
I don't think it was necessarily a criminal act, but it was wrong, because once the court had ruled that he shouldn't do it,
Yeah.
it was probably impeachable, frankly. But
Yeah. Well,
so
the other thing is, as a lawyer, and I'm not a lawyer, but it just seems to me the pardon power, at least to preemptively pardon someone. I don't, they haven't been charged with a crime. There's like very little parameters. That I find shocking, really, to give a blanket pardon to whether it's Hunter, whether it's his brother. Well, it makes him look guilty to give someone a pardon when they haven't even been charged with anything.
That's counterintuitive, also. And when he did it, my lawyer got back on again, and I said that can't be the law. That's ridiculous. So I looked it up, and it is the law. It's okay. The Supreme Court ruled you can preemptively pardon people. I think it's crazy, but that's what the law is.
But the loophole to that is, like you said, like it kind of makes you turn your eyes and say, well, did this person do something wrong that they weren't charged and get caught? But now we're looking at them. They've waived their Fifth Amendment right. They can't plead the Fifth because they can't be held liable for it. So Congress can still haul them in for questioning, and they're still under oath. So there's kind of a double-edged sword in that way.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I think that this is something that's disappearing into the rearview mirror.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. So this past weekend, the DNC held their convention. And to me, just watching all the clips that came out of it, it showed me they learned nothing from November. And that they're still, arguing over these stupid culture wars. They didn't spend a single moment talking about the things that the people elected Donald Trump for, the economy, the border, things that impact their day-to-day, not whether or not you're using the right pronoun or we're electing an equal balanced number of men and women onto our board. So did you see any of that coverage? What was your takeaway from where the DNC is at? Because it just seems like they're lost in the wind still.
The same as you. I watched it. I read about it, and I agree completely with you. They've learned nothing. But I think my opinion is that their doctrine that they believe in, that they've been governing on during the Biden years, has now become almost a cult religious type of thing. They believe it because they believe it, and so they believe it. And they're not interested in whether the voters rejected it or not. They believe it. And so that's it. The weirdest part about it was when they decided to run candidates for their national chairmanship, it had to have a certain number of women and a certain number of men and have gender balance.
Mm-hmm.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
And that's what they've been doing for 4 years. Americans understood that that's what they were doing, and they rejected it. Now, the one more thing, they doubled down. It was very interesting. They also said, well, wait a minute. We don't have two genders here. We have three. because the
73.
Chinese people said, well, we're not men and we're not women. We're sort of a hybrid men, women. And so we get to be to have a quota in the candidacies also. And the Democrats said, yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Now, that is not only that's nuts, that's doubling down on nuts. That's just crazy. And so you got to ask yourself, what are they doing? And to Jackie's point, they learned nothing. This is something that the American people have rejected at the ballot box. I think it was a principal reason why Trump was elected. And they have learned nothing on this. And why not? Because it's their religion. They believe it because they believe it. And it's going to be very hard for them to pry themselves away from this crazy doctrine, and which I think was very pivotal in the last election.
Well, I'm fine with them continuing to take their time on that. We'll just keep picking up wins in the midterms and keep going.
Well, you know what I liken this to? Remember, back in the days we were young when Democrats lost the White House 3 straight times. Remember, you had Reagan, then you had he got reelected, then you had H.W. And it wasn't until losing the 3rd time that they moved more center. I know to you and I, we don't consider Bill Clinton necessarily center, but by the party standards, he was. And so they nominated Clinton because they wanted to win so bad in 92. I think they hang on to the lefty nutty stuff they've got now for a while. I don't think they're going to change right away.
Fingers
I think it's
crossed.
going to take a couple losses.
It's doctrinal. But let me be clear about how I feel about this. I mean, take this trans issue, which is the most interesting part of their doctrine. I'm not in favor of abusing anybody or being mean to anybody or making fun of anybody. If some person wants to be trans and live that way, knock themselves out. And I think that their friends, neighbors, and relatives can react any way they want to, friendly or unfriendly. It's just the way that it is. Where I think that the Democrats have gone wrong is they are trying to persuade the American people to deny reality. They're trying to say to the American people, no, there aren't just 2 genders. There's a 3rd gender. That this man who is trans is now actually a woman. Actually a woman. They're trying to redefine gender, and persuade the American people that their definition of gender is reality. The American people know that it isn't. And so I think they're resentful because they're being indoctrinated into something they know is not true. Well, that's what the Soviets used to do to their people.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know. Did I ever tell you the story of, it was in Fairfax County at the public schools. There's a girl that her family was from North Korea. They escaped North Korea. The girl goes through Fairfax County public schools and graduated and said that the indoctrination was worse in Fairfax County than it was in
we should have her on the show.
Yeah. I heard that story. I don't know if it's apocryphal or not.
I would hate.
I think that's all it is. And the other thing is, along the lines of a tactic, is the drag show thing that USAID apparently helped fund. I've been thinking about why that fetish or why that affinity for the drag show. I think that again goes to kind of trying to soften the differences. A man and a woman, and you wear that tie or you wear a dress, and it just tries to kind of break down sort of roles or stereotypical look or how you look and how you act.
Well, I don't know, but with the USAID money that they put into it, I think they could buy good stuff.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole topic on stuff that was run to the congressional record about how to get communism into the United States. That I could go on in a whole another hour about, that I heard Ben Carson talk about a while ago, but that's a topic for another time. We're almost out of time, so I need to take the time to plug. Tomorrow is First Thursday, which means it is Pizza and Politics. Tomorrow we have Audrey Scott, who is from the Reagan administration, the former mayor of Bowie, and the last elected Republican in PG County. Lord help us. My fingers crossed is that Trump is going to follow through on one of his promises, which is to move a lot of these federal agencies out of the DMV. That might give us a fighting chance in Montgomery County and PG County. We'll see what happens. If Maryland turns red, you know why. But thank you all. Hopefully you join us tomorrow for Pizza and Politics. If you do, drive carefully. We're supposed to get some icy weather overnight. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us as always. And Dave, thank you so much for co-hosting with me. And we will be back next week with another guest.
Thanks for the opportunity to be with you.